Welcome back to my channel. So if you are a frequent viewer of my channel, you know that I have been in a little bit of a reading slump recently. And because I've been reading less, I haven't really been doing monthly wrap-ups just because I've been averaging like 2-3 books a month, and that isn't something that you can really make a whole video about. So I thought it would be fun to show you the last 10 books that I have read. So starting off, the first book I read was Pack Power Play by Melissa Huxley. I actually read this on my Kindle, so I unfortunately do not have a physical copy, but this book is a college romance, it's a hockey romance, it has multiple POVs, it's white shoes, and it also takes place in the Omegaverse. So Pack Power Play is actually the second book in an interconnected standalone series. It's actually about the best friend of the main female character of the first book. And I'm gonna try not to spoil anything in the synopsis, so I'm sorry if it's super vague. But basically, Alexis, Molly's best friend, she has been hiding her true identity basically her whole life. Even her best friend does not know the truth. And one day she gets offered this full ride scholarship to this fancy American university, and she decides to take it. And it just kind of goes crazy from there. I really liked this book. I read this around the time that I had just read Bride by Ali Hazelwood, and that book just led me down the rabbit hole of what the Omegaverse was. And for some reason at that time, I was just eating it up. I think it's such a fun trope. It kind of mixes in aspects of romance and fantasy, but like it's not as confusing as fantasy is because it takes place in our world, so there really is no world building involved. So I ended up rating this book a 4 out of 5. I actually finished the entire book in one night. I pulled an all-nighter to read it. I'm gonna be so real with you guys, I have not done that in months. So, check it out. So the next book I read was My Dark Romeo by Parker J. Huntington. This is a dark romance. It has like slight enemies to lovers, forced proximity, and then the biggest trope, marriage of convenience. So this is about Dallas. She comes from a very wealthy, privileged life. Think very olden times, Bridgerton vibes, but set in modern day, if that makes sense. So she basically has been in this arranged marriage since forever. She knew from a very young age that she was supposed to marry this guy. One day she goes to a party and she is caught kissing a man that she is not engaged to. So in order to preserve her like honor and purity or whatever, she has to break off her prior engagement and marry the guy that she was seen making out with, essentially. I ended up rating this book a 2.75. I was really excited to read this book just because I love the marriage of convenience trope. However, I think the characters just fell a little flat for me. Don't get me wrong, I am a huge supporter of grumpy main male characters. I love the moodiness and the dramaticness that comes with a grumpy MMC. However, the main guy in this book has no redeemable qualities at all. He's just horrible, and he does horrible things to Dallas, and I just can't support that. Even if it is a dark romance, there are just some lines that I cannot cross. I'm sorry, I just can't get behind it. I also felt like Dallas and Romeo had no emotional connection. Everything felt very physical. I don't think they ever went on a date, if I'm gonna be honest. And I think that was like the main issue for me, is like, you're married to this person, you claim that you can't live without them, yet I feel like you don't know them, like, at all. So 2.75, it unfortunately was kind of a miss for me, but the cover is gorgeous, so I guess that's a win. So the next book we have is The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. This is about Jack and Hannah. Jack is actually a famous actor and Hannah is his bodyguard. The reason why Jack needs a bodyguard is because he's visiting his sickly mother, and in the past he's had some stalker incidents. However, he doesn't want to tell his mom about why he needs a bodyguard and his stalker issues, just to avoid any added stress or worry on her part. And so because of this, him and Hannah have to fake date. So it's fake dating, he's famous, she's not, bodyguard trope, it's forced proximity, it's friends to lovers, and it's also a closed door romance. I ended up rating this book a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. I've heard such great things about Catherine Center as an author for such a long time, and I'm so glad that I finally got to read her work because she is just amazing. I can't wait to read more of her books. I felt like this book was super fast paced. There was always something happening. The fake dating trope was done well. I liked how they kind of became friends along the way and like really leaned on one another. I also really loved the fact that the girl was the bodyguard. This was my first time reading a trope like that. I feel like when the bodyguard trope is done, it's always the man that's the bodyguard. So that was actually a really fun twist. I think Catherine Center also does a great job of incorporating fun rom-com moments with a deeper message. This book focuses a lot on themes of grief, and I think it just added something to the overall story. Like, yes, it's a cute rom-com, but it also has some deeper topics that kind of gives it a little bit more substance. So the next book I read was The Nanny by Lana Ferguson. This is about Aiden and Cassie. Cassie just recently lost her job working at this hospital. So because she doesn't want to be broke and homeless, she ends up becoming a nanny for this single dad, Aiden. Aiden is a recent single dad. He is also a chef at this very upscale restaurant, and his work is just very demanding of him, which causes him to kind of struggle and be overwhelmed by the aspect of being a single parent. However, here is the fun part. This is not your average single dad nanny trope book, okay? Cassie used to have a cam girl page back in the day. It has since then been deactivated. However, before it was deactivated, Aiden used to be one of her top contributors. So it's the single dad trope, it's the nanny trope. They have an online meet cute, but they don't know that they met each other. It's forced proximity because she's a live-in nanny. It's kind of forbidden love because Aiden and her really want to stick to this professional relationship because he is essentially her boss. And yeah, I ended up rating this book a 3.25. I just thought the premise was so fun and interesting. I honestly haven't read a book like this before, so the whole premise was just very interesting and fun to me. I absolutely loved the build-up of them like getting together, the will they, won't they, the forbiddenness of it all. I just thought that was super fun, and it's a very spicy book. My biggest complaint is that I just felt like the two characters never reached that emotional bond. Their relationship was very physical, and I felt like they just never like truly spent time together getting to know one another. And because of that, I felt like the romance in part was kind of lacking because I do need to feel like the characters have a physical bond. So yeah. So the next book we have is The Housemade Secret by Frida McFadden. This is actually the second book in the Housemade trilogy by her. It takes place a few years after the first one. Millie is going to college. She's trying to get a social work degree, but she's still working as a housekeeper and things are going well for her until she loses her current housekeeping job. And because she is an ex-convict, it's really hard for her to find work. So when the Garrick family offers her this housekeeping job, she can't say no. However, it's not long after she starts the job that she kind of starts to notice that the Garrick couple are a little weird. Something's off. So Millie obviously has to stick her nose into their business, and yeah. I ended up rating this book a 3.75. I really like Frida McFadden. She just always gets me. There are so many twists and turns, and honestly, sometimes when I'm reading her books, I feel like it's giving me whiplash because I'm just like, oh my gosh, what is going on? However, compared to the first one, I just felt like this book was way slower paced. I honestly didn't feel like anything was going on until like 50 to 60% through, which is not really what you want in a thriller book. You want to be like immediately immersed into the story and second guessing everything. However, there's a lot of like mundane chapters, it felt like, but trust me, when the shit hits the fan, it goes crazy, okay? That's when it just like really got me. And honestly, honestly, if it wasn't for that last like half of the book, I probably would have DNF'd it. So the next book I read was actually on my Kindle, and it was The Veiled Kingdom by Holly Renee. Please excuse my pronunciation of these names, but it's about Nira and Dakre. I want to say I'm so sorry if I'm butchering these names. So Nira is a princess, and she's born into this magical kingdom where basically the royal family always has these really cool powers, and they're the most powerful family in the kingdom, and that's why they rule over everyone. However, she was born without powers, so she has basically been hidden her entire life because they can't let the people find out that their princess has no powers. That is, until one day she actually escapes the castle, but she ends up in the lap of her enemies, which is a rebellion. And our main male character, Dakre, is part of this rebellion. He's the commander's son, and he is not fooled by Nira. He sees her for exactly who she is. This book is a adult fantasy romance. It's enemies to lovers. It's forced proximity. It reminded me a lot of Powerless by Lauren Roberts, just with smut. So if you liked Powerless, you'll probably like this series as well. I ended up rating this book a 4 out of 5. I absolutely loved this book. I finished it in one day. It's about 300 pages, I think, or maybe it's just like a little bit under that, which is amazing. I feel like fantasy books are always like 500, 600 pages, and that really turns people away from starting fantasy. But this book is just so fast-paced. It has a heavy romance subplot. It's short and sweet and spicy. Like, what else would you want? If you're thinking about getting into fantasy, highly, highly recommend this book. Just because the romance is really at the forefront of the book. It's short, it's sweet. The world building is not that complicated. Highly recommend. So the next book we have is Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This is about Brianna and Jacob. They are both ER doctors at the same hospital. Jacob is a new doctor there, and he makes an awful first impression on his first day of work. He just comes off very standoffish and rude, and it just doesn't fly with the other nurses and doctors, especially Brianna. She just cannot stand Jacob at all. However, in actuality, Jacob is this nice guy. He just suffers from social anxiety. I absolutely adored this book. I rated it a 4 out of 5. Jacob is probably one of my favorite main male characters ever. I just adore him. This book is enemies to friends to lovers. It's also fake dating, it's forced proximity, it's workplace romance. And there's also that trope where they write letters to each other, which was probably one of my favorite parts. I'm not gonna lie. I thought it was super well done and super, super cute. Abby Jimenez is probably one of my favorite authors ever. She reminds me a lot of Emily Henry and Catherine Sinner, just because she's able to take these like fun rom-com tropes and storylines, but also incorporate real, deeper themes and meanings. Like I mentioned earlier, Jacob, the main male character, suffers from anxiety, and Brianna is kind of like the first person outside of his family to really understand him and to take the time and patience to really be there for him so he can have a safe place and a safe person, and I just thought that was so endearing. Highly recommend this book if you have not read it yet. So the next book I read was Hooked by Emily McIntyre. I read it on my Kindle, so I unfortunately do not own the physical copy, but this is the first book of the Never After series by Emily McIntyre. If you did not know, the Never After series is basically a dark romance retelling of these storybook characters. So Hooked is a Peter Pan retelling where Captain Hook is the main character. He gets the girl. He's not good. He's very much morally gray, but Peter Pan is essentially the bad guy in this story. I ended up rating Hooked a 3.75. It quite literally got me hooked, pun intended. It was that good. I actually read it in a reading vlog that I posted a while back, and I had a lot of DMs and comments being like, I need to read this book, or I just got convinced to read this book and it's So good. I would describe Hooked as being very Wattpad-esque, but in the best way possible. Like, it was just pure vibes, and it kept me thoroughly entertained. I finished it in one day, if that tells you anything. Like, I was just devouring it. I thought it was so fun. It was about like 300 pages, so that perfect length of a romance book. Not too short, not too long, just like you could finish it in a day if you wanted to. So the next book I read was The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. I'm pretty sure this is their newest release. It's about Liam and Anna. They got married in college, not because they were in love, but because they wanted to qualify for the free family housing. So it's giving very much marriage of convenience because we're both broke college kids. However, when they both graduated, they thought that they had gotten divorced, but almost 5 years later, Liam knocks on Anna's doorstep and practically begs her to come to his sister's wedding and pretend to be his wife so he can get his inheritance of $100 million. So this book is Marriage of Convenience. Like I stated earlier, it's fake dating, it's forced proximity, it has a tropical island setting, and it has a lot of rich people problems and drama, which I personally love in a book. I just eat it up like, oh no, your yacht broke down, like what are you gonna do? It's just so much fun. I ended up rating this a 3 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. However, it just kind of felt like it ended abruptly. I felt like there were still a lot of things that needed to be reconciled and kind of delved into that we didn't have time to delve into. But I do think this book is great if you want to feel like you're on a tropical vacation. If you don't want to let go of the summer vibes yet, highly recommend this book. So the last book of this collective wrap-up was Scarred by Emily McIntyre. This is the second book in the Never After series by her, and it's actually a loose retelling of The Lion King. So in this book, Scar is our morally gray main character, and he ends up falling in love with his brother's fiance. So it's a dark romance, it's forbidden love, they're royalty, so it kind of takes place in this almost fantasy-like world. It's slow burn. There's kind of this revenge subplot going on, and it just was so good. I ended up rating this book a 3.5. The story kept me so engaged. I really liked all the different subplots of the revenge and the rebellion, things like that. I also really liked the main female character. She held her own. I really thought it was a nice 180 from Wendy, who is very much the opposite of the main female character in Scarred. Even though I really did love the overall plot and storyline, I do feel like because there was so much going on that the romance did lack a little bit, but I think I'm like okay with that. I think I've made my peace with it because the story itself was just so good. I was really rooting for the characters. It really felt like a fantasy world even though there were no real fantasy aspects. So those were the 10 most recent books that I have read. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up. Comment down below if you've read any of these books, if you're wanting to read any of these books. I'd love to know. Make sure to subscribe for more videos. I have a lot of fun things planned for this channel, so subscribe so you don't miss out. I also have a Bookstagram, currently .overbooked, so go follow me on there. I post daily. I post reels, book reviews, book updates, anything book related I post on there, so go give me a follow. And yeah, I will see you next time. Goodbye.